Dr. Kemi for Kemi Talks Media, Surviving Buhari. We're talking about the top 20 scandals in Buhari's legacy. Our former president in Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, who passed away. Number 19, the Umaru Dikko affair. Some of you have heard about the Dikko affair. You can read it on Wikipedia. Everything you see on Wikipedia is exactly correct. Okay, there's been a lot of people who try to vandalize that a few times. Everything is correct. It happened. Okay, I was 20 years old when this happened in 1984. Remember I said Buhari took over the government in 1983. My father was a governor in that 3-month government. Shagari, my dad, and so many other governors were removed from office. And, Buhari became the leader. However, Buhari came in as the leader that wanted all the accountability for the corruption. Yeah, I mean, Shagari's administration, there was some corruption in there, that second term, which brought my dad as a 3-month governor. But at the end of the day, Buhari was lawless, okay? He didn't do things the right way. There was a minister in that administration called Umaru Dikko, and he happens to be Buhari's, Shagari's in-law. All right. I think Dikko is married to Shagari's sister. But anyway, he looted, allegedly, 6 billion naira. At that time, 6 billion naira was $6 billion. Okay. Umaru Dikko's money was not, I think it was 4 billion. I did discuss that with my dad at one point in life. And my dad said, it's like 4 billion. But remember, we were at 1-to-1. So it was a lot of money. And he fled to London. After the coup, Buhari, asked for everybody's head. He arrested ministers, governors. My dad was one of the governors arrested, almost everybody. And my dad was one of the first 6 that were let go. My dad, Governor Ajashim, and others. I think Jakonde was let go too. But at the end of the day, all of them were in Kwanti and they were sleeping on the floor. And my mom would go to Kwanti to take rice and plantain to my dad, inside takeaway and all that. Like, oh my God, Buhari was crazy. He was a dictator and he was wearing a military uniform. So now what happened was when Umaru Dikko got to London, he started criticizing the administration of Buhari. Buhari got mad and wanted accountability for that 6 billion approximately. So he organized a kidnap. Yeah, Buhari was fighting kidnappers, bandits, terrorists while he was president, but he was the master kidnapper. Yeah, the master kidnapper. At that time, this story is like unbelievable. Some of you are Boki kids there from northern Nigeria writing it didn't happen, it didn't. You better listen to history because I'm a self-imposed historian, aside from being a retired journalist. Okay, so I happen to be in America at the time, but on a street I lived in London when I was doing my A-levels, Cromwell Road is where all the action started. A lot of rich Nigerians live in that area, but what Buhari wanted was they wanted to bring Dikko back home, Umaru Dikko. So they planned his kidnap. Buhari hired the Israeli Mossad. If you know Mossad, that's like the CIA of Israel. At that time, we didn't have diplomatic relations with Israel. I mean, it's like Israel needed our oil and, we needed their arms. They sold us arms, we sold them oil. But formal diplomatic relations we didn't have at that time with Israel. And even though 1 or 2 people would say they're going for pilgrimage, it was always like, apply for visa, go for your pilgrimage, come back. So now what happened was the Mossad guys were hired and they were dispatched to London. And the security agents from Nigeria were also dispatched to London. The army guy, Mohammed Yusuf. So Yusuf and his people, they acted as if they were refugees from the exiled administration, like they ran from Nigeria. And the Mossad hired hotels where a lot of African tourists stayed because they were watching Dikko on how they're going to carry him. So at the end of the day, both parties worked separately. And one day he was coming back from somewhere and Dikko parked his car and was taking a walk to his apartment. Somewhere around that Cromwell Road, they spotted him. They now notified each other and they took him. When they took him, they hired one doctor. Oh, look at me doing video and I didn't have Dr. Shapiro, an Israeli doctor. He was the one that gave that injection that took Dikko out. Once Dikko was out, they put him in a shipping crate and they moved that crate to Stansted Airport where a Nigerian Airways, plane was waiting, a 707. And once they shipped him in there, the key of solving this thing was Elizabeth Hayes. This was Dikko's secretary, a British woman. She alerted the authorities. So by the time the crate got there, they had already gone through customs so that they have a crazy diplomatic baggage. But when Elizabeth Hayes told the authorities, they said they want to see what's in that crate. So the British police opened it. Metropolitan Police, Scotland Yard, they opened it, and in there was Dikko drugged and like literally unconscious. They rushed him to the hospital. They arrested everybody, almost 11 people. The main ringleaders, the Mossad guy was, arrested. Mohammed Yusuf, those guys got 8 to 11 years in prison. And they were released after 6 to 8 years in prison. They did some good time there. Mrs. Thatcher was angry, the Prime Minister of the UK. She met with the Queen. The Queen was pissed off. And Queen Elizabeth broke diplomatic relations with Nigeria for 2 years. And that was the beginning of our nightmare. When the Queen told them to break diplomatic relations with Nigeria to teach us a lesson, because of one man, Buhari, we used to travel to London and we get stamped at the airport for 6 months, leave to remain. If you went to school, you got 2 years on your passport. So there was no diplomatic relations anymore. Nobody could travel for 2 years to the UK. It was a nightmare. Those of you schooling in the UK at that time, some of you had to come home, go to Nigerian universities. Can you imagine? You went to school in the UK, your parents are paying, you didn't do anything wrong, and now you have to go back home because no more diplomatic relations. So it was a real big nightmare. So now, and they even removed us from the Commonwealth. And Mrs. Thatcher was like the Iron Lady at that time. Please go and Google her, the Prime Minister, the female Prime Minister. The Nigerian Airways pilot, he did 6 to 8 years. Everybody did time, and then they were released before the 11 years. However, Dikko now went about living his life and all. President Buhari was asked to do a formal extradition. He really wanted Dikko and that money. Buhari now filed an extradition. I mean, the guy is an illiterate, Buhari is an illiterate criminal. He now filed formal extradition, the way it's supposed to be done, and the British government refused. They were not extraditing Dikko. Dikko lived in the UK for the rest of his life, and I mean, he lived well. Look at his children. Look at that money, 6 billion Nigerian money. Even though my dad says about 4, it's still good money. I mean, that money was 1-to-1 when this happened. And they had a lavish house. They lived well. They went to school there. None of them ever came back to Nigeria. So when Umaru Dikko died a few years ago, it was in the news. They announced his children spoke to the media, and I think they buried him over there in the UK. But like that kind of life is very sad. At the end of the day, when our diplomatic relations was patched back up and we're given diplomatic relations, we never got our privileges back. Since that 1984 incident, we now have to collect visas to go to the UK. Today, I'm seeing Nigerians trying to go to the UK. They're at warehouse visa centers. You know what I mean by warehouse visa centers? Please, TPL or TSL. Can you correct me if I don't know the name? Some places that you have to go if you want to apply for a British visa. And you all line up and wait to do interview, all that. That's what they reduced us to because of President Buhari. When President Buhari was running for president in 2015, he went to Chatham House and that whole Dikko thing came up and he apologized to Nigerians and the British alike. But do you know that the Nigerian government and the Israeli government have never acknowledged their part? They've never formally said, it was us, and Mossad has never said we worked with. They've never admitted it, even though Buhari apologized for the whole thing. This is life. One leader cost us our diplomatic freedom in the UK, and the British ruled us. So that's the story with Umaru Dikko, the kidnap. You can go to Wikipedia and look at the Dikko affair, and that's how President Buhari tried to kidnap, a minister. If you remember when Buhari was in power and Rotimi Amechi was the transportation minister, I made a joke about something he did, and I said, better be careful before Buhari gives you the Dikko treatment. He was Minister of Transportation and Shagari's Minister of Transportation. So I was mocking Rotimi that he would get the Dikko treatment, kidnapping and all that. As much as the jokes went, it was not funny. But that's one of the things that he did. Number 19 in the Buhari scandals. Continue to watch. They're waiting on YouTube for each number. Continue to watch Surviving Buhari. I'm Dr. Kemi. And don't forget to support my videos.